Hey, how about you, everybody? Welcome into the Monday edition of Inside the 20 with myself, Keith Niebuhr. It is our job, our goal to get as much recruiting intel to you with inside the 20-minute mark. I'm your host, Jeffrey Lee, Senior Recruiting Editor for Auburn Live on 3. If you're not a member of that site, now is the perfect opportunity because we have news flowing and news coming. Plenty of news from the recruiting weekend. A lot of recruits showed up. We're going to go over that real quick. Joined, as I always am, by Mr. Keith Niebuhr. Keith, how the hell are you, buddy?
I'm good, Jeffrey, man. It's another interesting weekend. Let's put it that way. Never dull on the plains, is it?
Never a dull minute on the plains. Even yesterday, when I went to get post-visit interviews, some exit interviews from the official visitors, sitting there waiting on the guys, and watched the cat get run over. And
oh my God!
And three, college chicks were freaking out. It was they called the cops. I think the cat made it. I think they rushed him to the vet. And so T's and P's for that cat. T's and P's for the cat. I think he was okay. Yeah, lots to get over, lots to talk about from this weekend. A lot of recruits showed up for the game. A lot of positive interviews, a lot of positive quotes from guys who saw it. It was a back and forth game. The atmosphere was incredible. But before we get to all that, Keith, want to give a big how about Caleb Schofield, our sponsor for the show, Caleb Schofield from Mike Patton Auto. If you're looking for a new or used vehicle and anywhere in the country, because he delivers, give Caleb Schofield a call, 334-531-0966. There in LaGrange, Georgia. He sells new Ford, Lincoln, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and even Hondas. Got a fantastic used car vehicle lot. And everything comes with a warranty. All used cars pass a multi-point inspection before they get them off the lot, and they back those used cars with a free 3-month, 3,000-mile warranty. The new cars are even better. It comes with a free lifetime powertrain warranty, unlimited time, unlimited mileage. Big deal there for all your new cars. Not in the market. Know somebody who is? Caleb will give you $300 for the referral. Give Caleb a call, 334-531-0966. We appreciate Caleb's support of the show. We encourage everybody to support him as well. Keith, you heard a lot of the interviews from the post-game interviews. A lot different tone than the post-Penn State game interviews. We listened to Quay Russo. We listened to James Smith, 2 5-star guys. And I thought, Keith, to specify, I thought the two more intriguing guys that visited were Reuben Bain, the 4-star edge from Miami Central, as well as the 3-star offensive lineman Clay Whedon from Carroll Day in Tampa. But what were your thoughts listening to those interviews, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like the kids were being genuine. We caught them in a moment of emotion, and we heard a lot of "we" in those interviews. Those kids referring to Auburn as "we," uncommitted kids. Now, that's not uncommon. If you're at a school, you're pulling for that school 9 times out of 10. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, a lot of positivity. I mean, look, the atmosphere at Jordan-Hare is always great. The difference between this game and the Penn State game is that this wasn't just atmosphere 3 hours before the game until halftime. This was 3 hours or 4 hours before the game until, after the game. And it was nonstop all day. And the kids were excited to be there. They enjoyed themselves. A friend of mine spent some time with a bunch of the kids from South Florida after the game and said that all of them had been there before, but this was such a new experience for them. I mean, they're used to going to games down at other schools. We'll say, well, we don't have to name which ones, where the crowds aren't always that good. It's not that electric. And they were blown away. So Auburn's making some headway down in South Florida. Other kids loved it too. I mean, they just like visiting Auburn in general, but on a game day, a big game at Auburn, there's really not too many places like it. Now, I'm not going to say there's nothing like it. We don't know that. I haven't been to every place. I'm sure it's electric at a lot of different schools, but this was an all-day environment that was off the chart for these kids, and that's going to leave a good taste in many of their mouths, regardless of any cloud that hangs over the coaching staff right now, the current coaching staff. So, again, a moment of positivity. And the thing is, like, kids, again, are a lot more cerebral. Not cerebral. They're a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for, Jeffrey? When they maybe pragmatic. When a team loses, they don't always, they're not ready to jump off the boat. Now, they don't, or jump out of the boat. They don't have as much invested as a fan, let's say, that's been going to Auburn games for 30 years. But the question is, as great as it went, and their experience, even though Auburn lost, they loved being there. They loved pulling for Auburn and getting into it. It's one game doesn't kill you, but we've talked about, well, what does that one game mean to the coaching staff, though? And now there's more negative noise. And so on the one hand, you've got the negative noise out there pretty much reaching a feverish pitch. But on the other hand, the guys that were there loved it. And regardless of what happens to the coaching staff, that might make an impact for some of these kids. I don't know. We're in a weird spot right now.
Very weird.
What does it really mean? What does it mean for a guy like Ruben Bain, who I know you love and I love, and gosh, I think you interviewed him after the game and he was raving about it. And I spoke to a South Florida source who said, listen, if Ruben knew the coaching staff was definitely going to be here, I think Auburn might get him. And, that's a pretty big statement, pretty bold statement, but Ruben doesn't know what's going to happen. So we don't know what's going to happen. The coaching staff doesn't know what's going to happen. The fans don't know what's going to happen. But just that game as a whole, though, just that in its own entity, it was something special for the kids there.
It really wasn't. And somebody asked me on the corner last night, it was last night, about the atmosphere at Auburn. And as good as it was still in Auburn standards, like a 7.5 or an 8.
I saw that you said that you really, so it wasn't even what was it, a couple notches below like an Iron Bowl or what?
Sure. Oh yeah. And like at the start of the game, the corners of the upper deck were still yet to be filled in, and it was loud. But again, you go back to that Iron Bowl a year ago, that was freaking that was off the charts. It really was. That was one of the better environments inside that stadium that I've seen throughout the game. And don't get me wrong, a lot of these kids were, like Ruben Bain said, it's the best environment I've ever seen. And I thought, man, for Auburn standards, that was kind of a B-. It's kind of a B-. You could tell there was some hesitancy in these guys and the fans. And, when the game's going back and forth, and it looks like Auburn should really win this game. You're up 17-0 at home. And, it was almost like everybody was waiting for it to happen, waiting for something negative to happen. And then it happens, and then, what was it? The fumble by the turnovers is what just took the air out. And then, but the fans just kept coming back. So did the defense. And then it was just like one thing after another there towards the end of the game. And I don't want to say the fans expected it, but again, there was something keeping that from going up to a 9 or a 10 level. Yeah. And I'm guessing it was the hesitancy of the fans, just kind of worried about what's going to happen.
So Jeff, here's something that helped Auburn with the kids, I think, with the recruits. Those recruits, they still see LSU as being a powerhouse. Now, my eyes and your eyes tell us differently. That's not the same LSU. It's not the same Auburn. But to a lot of those prospects, it was
Auburn LSU, man.
Yeah, that's right. Auburn was toe-to-toe with LSU and easily could have won. I don't ever say should have won, although maybe Missouri should have won. Yeah. By the way, the guy from Missouri that missed the chip shot field goal a week earlier.
Big dog.
Made 2 50-yarders against Georgia, the same guy. But anyway, that's football.
He probably warmed up before he kicked.
Yeah, I think, again, a lot of positivity. An offensive lineman, Clay Whedon, down in Florida, committed to Michigan State. May not be able to make it to a Michigan State game this year. He's already taken his official visit up there, but he was able to make it to Auburn. Loved it. Loved the atmosphere, the energy, the fight in the team. That's another thing. You mentioned Quay Rousseau and James Smith, and I listened to your interviews with them, and they both mentioned the fight of the team, that they were impressed. There was no quit. I think Auburn was better than people. I mean, look, I think LSU probably isn't as good as people thought, but I think Auburn played better than most of these kids probably thought they were going to play, kids being the recruits. I mean, look, even though Auburn lost, you couldn't ask for too much of a better atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Too much of a better day for a recruit. The Miami kids, all the South Florida kids, they got to tour the facilities. They got to see what the new football-only facility is going to look like. They got to go to a game where there was more than 30,000 people there. They loved it, and so did a lot of the other guys too. And it was a fun environment. And it might not have been the Iron Bowl. It might not have been the Deep South's oldest rivalry with Georgia, but it was fun, and they had a good time. And that's going to leave a taste in their mouth. And now, if Brian Harsin and his staff can survive, then it becomes a huge positive.
Absolutely.
But if they don't survive, look, it may not help you at all with the 2023s because you wouldn't know who a new staff would even want, quite frankly.
Right.
But the 2024s that went, that would remain on a new staff's radar and be pursued by them will always have that good taste in their mouth with Auburn. 2024s from South Florida, 2024s from Georgia, from Alabama, from all over that made it. 2025s. They'll remember that game. They'll remember that environment, and they'll say the next time they get an invite to go to Auburn, they'll think, you know what, I had a great time the last time I went. Let's go again. So there's no negative really in terms of recruiting impact. It just remains to be seen how much of a positive it'll be.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this, but getting these recruits, these top recruits from all these classes, even I think there was a 2026 guy there, a couple of them actually that Auburn had offered.
Wow.
But the coaches, Ruzick and Usher and all those guys, getting these Fabianich. I heard his name mentioned a couple of times in recruiting. As a matter of fact, Keith, you had posted an insider note on the corner yesterday about Drew Fabianich and Rock Bellantoni being two big deals in those South Florida kids coming up to the game. I believe that's what you said, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, I kind of like all the guys over there. We know them all personally, and Ruzick, Steven Ruzick, Darren Usher. Darren Usher, again, I feel like he sort of gets a bad rap on the message boards. I mean, that guy was doing the job of like 6 people that first year. I mean, did he have some missteps? Probably. We all do. I do every day. But, nobody knows about mine. But yeah, Drew Fabianich, the GM of Auburn football came in this summer right before Big Cat weekend, and he was at that event. And I guess he's also director of scouting too. Now, I'm not as I don't even really, the scouting side of it to me, I don't know. But the recruiting side of it is the most important side to me, because recruiting is relationships, and now they're, you got NIL and all that stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, a lot of South Florida people, you and I could tell. We just know. We both had conversations with Rock Bellantoni, and you could just tell he's a different kind of guy, just a incredibly personable guy, and it's not forced in any way, like it is with, quite frankly, a good bit of assistant coaches across the college landscape. They want to coach ball, maybe not just talk to people all day. Seems like he can do both, and effortlessly. He's a conversationalist. He gets to know people, and that is resonating down with prospects in South Florida. They're in the ball game with some guys. Edwin Joseph, a defensive back that they just recently offered, they're in it with him. He's at Hollywood Chaminade. They're making a lot of inroads down at that school. Ruben Bain, the 4-star, 5-star, whatever he is right now with Miami Central, edge rusher. They're in it. Auburn's in it because of Rock Bellantoni, and maybe no other reason really. And so, he's a guy that worked at FAU. He's got a lot of South Florida connections, and that's something where you'd like to see what he could do in a 4 or 5 year window, Jeffrey. I don't know if he's going to hit it. We don't know. We don't know what the future holds. But a lot of good things about him. And then also Fabianich, too, who people say is just an organizational freak. And he's communicating a lot with people at the high school level. And he's made a good impression. He's made a very good impression. At the end of the day, you still got to get your head coach on the phone. The head coach still has to be actively involved. But by all accounts, Drew Fabianich is really kind of rolled up his sleeves since he got there. And
absolutely. There are two things when it comes to recruiting. You're talking about relationships with the coaches and stuff, and also the atmosphere. And at this point, where Auburn is right now in this lull or this, you're kind of just spinning your tires right now because you don't know which way it's going to go. But there's two things you're selling: your relationships, the coaching staff, and then you're selling Auburn. And I think if nothing else, that this coaching staff is selling right now is Auburn in this environment, so that when a kid gets ready, do I want to go to Auburn and play in front of that hee-ho crowd? No, there is none of that. I think if nothing else, you're selling that environment, that home feel for these kids. You're making them want to come back, Keith, next year. Miles Graham was there this year, this past weekend, the Florida commitment, who's a stud linebacker. You had Jeremiah Beeman, the stud defensive lineman, several 2024s. Fat Burnett, Jamarian Burnett was there. So a lot of 2024 guys that you're going to be in on. Georgia, from Florida, from Alabama, all those guys were there, or a lot of those guys were there Saturday night. And Keith, imagine had Auburn lost to Penn State in the same fashion as they did LSU. And, because going into that Penn State game, we said the only thing that can't happen is for Auburn to get just, blown out. run off the field, and they did. I don't think Auburn was prepared. I don't think Auburn was a good enough team to stay in the game with Penn State. But here's what my point is. This
Yeah,
you said it best, Keith, and I'm going to repeat this on every show I'm on this week on all the Auburn line. You said it absolutely best on the message board. You said, I feel better about Auburn after this loss than I did after any win so far this year.
well, I was 3 sheets to the win when I wrote that, I think, Jeff, but that's another
Well, you need to be sheeting it more.
I know. Well, look, I mean, they showed a lot of fight, they looked more talented than they had the last few weeks. They looked like they could play with some people. Now, the question then becomes, is it because, they were so much better, or is LSU just really not the LSU we're used to seeing? And it probably
didn't look like a top 25 team to me. I think they managed to get. I mean, they're 4-1.
Yeah, 4-1 with a 1-point loss to FSU. They're not a terrible team, but but I mean, they again, Auburn showed a lot of fight, and also Robbie Ashford threw for over 300 yards. I mean, he had a couple mistakes, but I think at the end of the day, if you lose a close game and your young quarterback shows promise, that gets people a little bit more energized. Again, the question is, where are you now? Where are you headed? But but in terms of recruiting, I do think Auburn. I think they continue to make some headway. Clay Whedon's a guy that I feel like if they really push for, offensive lineman from Florida, I feel like they could maybe get him in the class.
We haven't even mentioned the official visitors. Tony Mitchell, the 5-star defensive back and the one we'll be keeping a close eye on. You're talking about Clay Whedon potentially being in this class. How about Alex Sanford, the linebacker committed to Arkansas?
Yeah. I mean, that's a guy that
who was very careful and cautious with his words when he left.
Yeah,
he was very intentional with his words. He didn't give a lot away. He was like, "That's all I'm going to say. Auburn has my eye. That's all I'm going to say." And if you're just reading that on paper, it doesn't really say much. But if you were me and watching him say this and smile and kind of look, and I'm not going to say anything else. Those words on paper don't really mean much, but his body language and the manner in which he said those things told me that Auburn has a lot more than his eye right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird right now. So much of the fan base thinks it's a foregone conclusion that the staff isn't going to be here, that Brian Harson's not going to be here. Recruits are not looking at it that way. They're talking to these guys and the coaching staff. I don't know. Somebody asked on the message board, "Hey, did they bring it up to these guys? Are you going to be back?" And I think some of them probably bring those concerns up during visits, and their parents certainly do. Hey, I want to know I'm going to be coached by you. What's the latest? And so what does the coaching staff say? They say what they have to say, which is, I intend to be here. I intend to be here. That doesn't mean they will be there, but they intend to be there. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. And they're having to really, it's tough. I mean, but
I plan to be here for as long as I possibly.
If you've been a coach long enough, you've coached under every situation. Hey, we got a lot of talent, and you may have to sit a while before you play, but trust us, you'll play and we'll get you the NFL, or the opposite. Hey, we need you right now. I mean, they've been through, if you've coached for 15, 20, 25 years, you probably have coached in every one of these types of situations. And so while it's not ideal, a guy like Rock Bellantoni, he's been around the block. A guy like Will Friend has been around the block. They know how to recruit kind of during these situations of uncertainty. But again, credit to the staff. They're still getting these guys to visit. They're in the ballpark. They're in the picture with a lot of kids. Now it's just, we have to see what happens before we can make any real projections one way or the other.
Yeah, read our good friend Philip Marshall column early this morning, and one thing I thought he came out and said is something needs to happen soon, whether or not they're going to stay or go. And I think, for guys like you and me, Keith, in this recruiting business, it's like we have to march on and cover these guys as though nothing's going on, right? I mean, you can't implant into interviews, hey, well, what if the coaches aren't here? That's not our job. So I hope, and I've said it before, I hope we know something by the end of this month of where this thing's going, and find some resolution to it so that people can move on. So we'll is that kind of how you feel, Keith? You think?
Yeah, because we can't, and we're going over the 20-minute mark here, unfortunately. But
play the flag.
we have to ask more open-ended questions. Hey, what are the positives with Auburn? What are some of the potential negatives you see? We have to let them answer it. Tell us what's on the mind. Not, does the coaching uncertainty,
Right.
does that scare you? And then the kid says, "Oh my God, I never thought of it." Yes, it does scare me.
There's uncertainty here. I had no idea.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can't interject that stuff.
Yeah, now sometimes it's unavoidable. We can't help kind of insert ourselves in there, but at this time, like, again, a lot of the kids, they're not bringing it up. So why would we bring it up? We're letting them talk, and they're talking about the relationships with the staff, the great atmosphere. They want to come back to more games. They want to come on official visits. And that's how we have to handle things right now. Now, if and when a change is made, again, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And a lot of those kids will at that time as well.
Absolutely. It would be a huge reset. But again, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Nothing to speak of right now as far as newsworthy goes. These coaches are busting their ass. They're getting kids on campus. They're selling Auburn. That's the least you could expect of a coaching staff right now. Getting these kids in on campus and letting Auburn sell itself, as well as some of these relationships with these assistant coaches. Hey, good stuff, Keith. Great weekend this past weekend for Auburn recruiting. They're going to be away from campus for the next 3 weeks. I think you're going to Georgia this weekend. Got at Ole Miss. There's a bye mixed in there before Arkansas comes back to town at the end of the month. 3 home games: Arkansas, Texas A&M, Western Kentucky. I would expect those weekends to be more recruiting weekends for Auburn. So y'all y'all stay tuned to Auburn Live on 3. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so now. You're watching us on YouTube. Go ahead and click that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notifications button, because we're going to be putting out free content all week long. Keith and I will be back on Wednesday to talk more recruiting. So everybody, look forward to that. We'll have a call-in show Tuesday night, modcast on Thursday, and we'll do another little recruiting show on Friday. Stay tuned all week, folks. We appreciate everybody listening, subscribing, and liking. For Keith Niebuhr, for Zach in the back, I'm Jeffrey Lee. Y'all stay out of the left lane. See you.